Hello, I'm Nelson Ford from the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And there's so much cool stuff here today, you're not going to believe it. I made one phone call to a guy that I knew he had a triple lock with an unusual spring system in it. And it looks like a V spring from a Colt Python, or originally the Colt 1894 officer's model revolver. And it brought on, I'll talk about this later, it brought on all kinds of things. There's the original action from a Smith & Wesson that we're all familiar with. This is the post-war with the safety bar in place, but without the safety bar and you move the pivot point on the hammer, it's the same action since like 1905. At any rate, he said, I've got a couple of unusual guns I'd like to bring over as a package, and you can have fun with them. So I'll start with the one I would consider the most meek, and it's a simple model of 1899. It's the first time the K-frame came out with the swing-out cylinder, made in 1901. So it's 124 years old. It has many really interesting things I'd like to show you. One is I could probably pop the side plate off and it would have bushings in the hammer and in the trigger, keeping the parts centered in the gun. They used to do really cool stuff in these guns. But this one, simply easy to see, is that the firing pin is held in with a solid pin. It's not a rivet like we see on the later guns. This is a much later gun. This is a 1937. You can see the rivet. So it's a solid pin gun. They only did this a couple of years. So this is probably early in the second year of 1901. Another cool thing about this gun is, and this is one of the conversations I have with people all the time, we need the front lockup. We need the new center lockup with the new ejector rod that doesn't have the center pin to create the ejector rod purchasing the front locking lug. So then, of course, Smith put the center lock in, and I pulled them out of some people's guns because they like the speed load, and there's no way you can pull off a great load. Sure, there are guys that can do it, but I find them hard to do the flip and the dump and the reload with that center lock. It puts undue strain on knocking the cylinder out. At any rate, there's no front lockup. This is like the model of 1896 32 I-frame, the first swing-out cylinder, and it's the same rod. It displays the same characteristics. I should have one of those out here to show you. So this is a 1901 with no front lockup. You can see that there's no movement. Cylinder's not loose. There's no gap. Nothing's happening. It's rock solid, and it's 124 years old without a front lockup. And so anybody that's all weird about their front lockup, you're on your own trip. Here's one that's 125 years old, and it has no problems without a front lockup. So this guy here was shipped to, this is a new term for me, I just learned it because it's on this paperwork over here, to a cinder dick. And a cinder dick is a railroad agent or railroad policeman. The cinders are from the wood burning and coming back, and covering the cars. If we were traveling on trains in 1901 and went through a tunnel, the whole tunnel would be full of smoke after the engine went through. And you put the windows up on the cars so you didn't get smoked out. And so they called them cinder dicks because they were covered with cinders from the wood burning, and they were detectives. But he used this as a detective for Santa Fe Railroad all the way up through the 20s, almost into the 30s, which makes this, a pretty cool gun. It also came with a period holster. Now, for all of us that think that an inside the belt holster is a really cool invention of our time, you're sadly mistaken. Here's a holster with the hardware so you can put it inside your pants, inside the belt, clip it in place. And not only does it's a nice holster to do hold your gun as best feature, but it also has this high flap. So if it's against your stomach or your gut and you lean over, you're not you're not putting your sweat or your weight on the gun. You have this flap there protecting it, and that's an amazing piece. But he brought me this gun and he said it'll go with the other cool nickel plated guns that you have there. And so we have a letter on it. It was delivered nickel plated. It was delivered to Simmons in St. Louis, which was probably a pretty good train hub at the time. It was the middle of the country. The trains probably a lot of them would pass through there. Like Winslow, Arizona is a big train hub. So that covers the little 38 1901. Great little piece, wonderful little gun. This this one is outrageous. A registered model with a lot of history. This is also another law enforcement gun. And this gun, I believe, was delivered to Monroe Hardware Company in Monroe, North Carolina. And this guy was a stud. He was his name was Quantum Bells. He was a deputy sheriff HQ Quantelbaum, Newberry County. This gun was shipped to was sold to Lomax Hardware. So maybe the North Carolina address is the one that shipped it back because it was delivered with a lot of features. This gun was delivered with the grip adapter, which are these steel plates that go under the grip. And if you have the high grips on here, what do they call them? It'll come to me. If you have the high grips, high horn, there's a name for them. These are the service grips. If you have the high grips, it would create a gap between your grip and your frame. So you need to have the service or the smaller grip in order to use these grip adapters. But they do put you in line with the trigger. I've seen these grip adapters sell for as high as $900 in the last year. And so they're an expensive feature. But back then they were probably $3 or $4, which was probably a lot of money then. This gun also exhibits other cool stuff. The gold bead in it, letters with the gold bead. It has a humpback hammer. A lot of people that are heavy duty collectors know about the humpback hammer. Most people do not. Somewhere along the line, Roy Jinks or somebody sent me a bunch of these pieces of paper, and it's an advertisement, an old advertisement from the time period in the 30s of these humpback hammers, and they were a feature. And I've seen a lot of them on K-22s, but they were also featured quite a bit on the registered models. So this is a registered model sold in 37, and then it was sent back to the factory. That's where Monroe. No, oh, the letters. There are 5 documents with the historical society on this gun, and there were 2 of them in this police department. Monroe Hardware sent back the order to get fill out the paperwork. So these you had to order these guns with a certain barrel length and features and sights. They were available with 7 different sights. These hammers, you could have them sighted in at different lengths, and you could order your own barrel length. You didn't have. You could say I want it 4.5 inches, and they'd make it. But this particular one was sent back for the nickel finish in 1939, and there are 2 of these revolvers that were with this police department in Monroe. It was actually I'm gonna find this information here. It was Newberry County, and Deputy Sheriff H.K. Quantelbaum and his chief sent their guns back for nickel plating. The chief, Sheriff Tom Fellers, also had a registered model. So these guys were studs. These were expensive guns at the time, and they both ordered these guns probably together, and they had all these features put on them. And then Quantelbaum sent his back for the plating. So this is a highly optioned registered model, and I think the guy wants to sell it, but because he's told me to make an offer on any one of these, but um, gosh, this thing's he's gonna have to ask a high price on this gun. It's got a lot of paperwork. The Historical Society has 5 documents on it. The Smith and Wesson Society. So that's an amazing gun right there. You can contact me at my shop if you want to know the owner, or if you can you want to make an offer on it. But that's a sterling registered model with a lot of history. Neither of these 2 guns that I expect to get. What I wanted to get was this triple lock, and this is an early one. They made 15,000 of them, and this one's got a 1500 serial number, 15 and change. And this exhibits features that I've never seen before. You know, at one time I owned one of these. I've worked on them at my shop. I had one that somebody cut the barrel on, a triple lock, a Target triple lock. And so I've seen many of these. I've had them shipped to me that had several problems with the front end. They usually have 2 pins up here to facilitate the second and third locking position. And you can see the skate up here where it comes in on the skate and it locks into place. But I've never seen a single pin. I've never seen one with a V spring in it. And this kind of looks like the I-frame from 1903 to 1904. They experimented with the 2 leaves in it, and one of them came down. And this one purchases the hand and pushes the trigger back forward with the hand force, the power of the hand. And, you know, of course, when you pull the trigger, it turns the cylinder, goes up, and then the force of the forward spring pushes the trigger forward, and the hammer rebounds after it fires. But that's a very unusual piece. I mean, this is the only time I've seen this spring system in these guns. The I-frame with the 03 to 04, they had the 2 leaves down here, positioned down here. I've never seen the Colt type V spring in a triple lock, and that's a wild look. And if you need to compare them, there they are. This is a first year model 29. That is another insane gun that is here today. This is a 5-screw model 29, and it's a unicorn because they never made the 1956 models, and I think they kept the 5th screw up until the middle of 57 with an 8-inch barrel, because the 8-inch barrel wasn't available on the 44 mag until 58. And so how does the 1956 pre-model 29, doesn't have a model number, how does it have an 8-inch barrel? And how it has an 8-inch barrel, there's another piece of paperwork around here. Here's a letter on it that states that it was shipped as a 6.5-inch blue, but because it's got the star and the the S for I think finishing, and the star is no for refinishing, for nickeling, and the S from the service department, it was reworked. Somebody with some foresight set it back, and these finishes were considered like the MP3 of its day. The nickel really protected the guns, and the guns that were nickel plated, they lasted a long time. This sat against some guy's hip on a train forever, and it has very light freckling, very little. And so the nickeling was a great choice. But this guy sent back this gun, and it has the star, not there, but on the back of the cylinder. Yes, there's a star right here. We'll get you a picture, up close picture of that. And then I think if you look on the registered model, yeah, they put the star down on the bottom of the grip frame because this gun was nickeled in 1939. So this one was sent back to be nickeled as well. They both have stars. One thing I love to do when I have one of these big 29s out, especially in nickel, the 8-inch barrel, this also had a pair of smoothies put on it. People call them presentation grips. The bottom of the grips, you can see the wood matches. They're always precisely fit. But when you see one of these big 29s, the dirty, hairy thing, I always like to pick up a model 34 and tell people, look at the difference. If you don't have a 34 in your collection, it's a J-frame 22 They're great. They made them in 2-inch. They actually made one called the 35 with a 6-inch barrel, which is kind of cool looking. But they're just so wonderful. And then if you really want to go to the tiny stuff, this gun actually dwarfs the original Lady Smith. And Lady Smiths, they've stamped Lady Smith and M&P, another sales gimmick for Smith and Wesson, on everything: bicycles, water bottles, backpacks. The Lady Smith they would put a frosted finish on it and stamp Lady Smith on anything. This is a true Lady Smith. These were made from, I think, 1900 or 1901 to 1921. And you can see how much smaller they were. This one's got a relatively long barrel. I've got a friend that's got one with a 6-inch barrel, and they're really rare. He wants a lot for that one, but it's for sale. If you're interested in one of these, a long barrel, and you've got a big bank account, I can refer you to them. But that's a real Lady Smith, and they are tiny. So you've covered quite a bit of stuff here. A new term for me was cinder dick. And actually, when I read that on the piece of paper, and from the guy I got it from, I thought, what the hell is that? Will you make up something? So I put in cinder dick in my search engine, and it came back as railroad agent or railroad police. And I thought, how cool is that? It really is a term. And so there's your inside the belt holster. There's a highly modified registered model. There's a very unusual. There's a safety bar out of this guy. There's a very unusual triple lock here, and some other cool Smiths. So it was a good day for me. All I did is make a few phone calls. People started bringing me guns, and this display was actually put together in the last 3 days. And I've got to try to do this every week because I'm starting to enjoy it, and it's becoming a part of me. I used to make up these displays on Sunday on a table right over there, my dining room table, of different guns, and I'd write a little story about it. And my son kept telling me, you ought to do this on the internet. You might make some money off of it, and you might get some credibility. And I've had a lot of fun doing them. So I got to thank you guys for your comments and your questions. And maybe Roy Jinks can give me a call and tell me what this is, because I've looked in some books and I haven't seen the V-spring in a Smith & Wesson action, apart from not the V-spring, but the twin leafs that were in the 1903 I-frame, 1903 and 1904. So that's a mouthful. And thanks for watching. And send me your comments and questions, and I'll try to answer them as best I can.